someone is breaking into your house, do you have a right to defend yourself and shoot them? The answer just might surprise you. Also, we're going to follow up a little bit on our series, Someone's Trying to Kill the President, in the fact that there is more political violence out there. All of this and more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster, what some people are calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. The Charlie Crime Buster name and all forms and abbreviations are property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains adult subject matter. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to today's program. Glad to have you aboard the Charlie Crime Train today. We got a whole lot of stuff to cover and not a lot of time to cover it in. That's why we call it the fastest minutes in podcasting. We're going to talk a little more about political violence, and we're going to talk about something really that has caught my attention. You see, there was a man who shot someone who had broken into his house. That man is now being charged with murder. Is that right? Well, we'll talk about that and a whole lot more on our today's program. But first, let me welcome you to the program. Whether you're a seasoned listener or you're a first-time listener, we always invite you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster, at gmail.com. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Also, let me encourage you, please help us out. Hit that like button and give us a review. A 5-star review will help us get this program out to more people so more people can join the Charlie Crime Train. So hit that like button, and don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, because that way you'll be notified every time we drop an episode. Hey, before we get into today's program, let me urge you to check out peacemakernetwork.com. That's our sponsor. You can read about the brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We're talking about military, law enforcement, and those wonderful first responders who come when we call them. Check it all out, peacemakernetwork.com. Now, while we'll be focusing on the fact that the guy shot somebody in his house that had broke into it, I want to take just a moment to go back to what we've been covering the past several weeks. We've been talking about somebody's trying to kill the president, and that led us down the rabbit hole of political violence. And during that time, amazingly, there was a story that developed that we did not cover. We gave you several illustrations of political violence, including, Majani and what he did with the CEO of United Health Care. Also some other political violence that we shared with you. And during that time, something had happened right during our podcast the last couple of weeks. And that was that there were actually 2 guys who shot and killed 3 men at a mosque there in San Diego. Yep, a mosque in San Diego. Now, those guys have been identified as 2 young men. One is 17 years of age. His name is Kane Clark. And the other guy was Caleb Velasquez. And both of these guys, he was 18 years of age. And both of those guys who did the shooting, the suspects, were found dead. And apparently they died with self-inflicted gunshot wounds. They actually found those guys in a vehicle just a few blocks down from the mosque, after they had shot and killed 3 people. Now, the 17-year-old, Kane Clark, his grandfather, a 78-year-old guy, his name was David Clark. He told the news up there, he said, "We know as much as you do," and he said, of course, it is a shock, and often it is a shock when you hear about loved ones that you have and love who are engaged in this kind of activity. Now, the sad part about this, as it is in a lot of these situations, is that this young man had a whole lot of potential. He had been on the wrestling team at Madison High School. That's according to the school's social media page. Spokesperson from that school said that he had been attending that school since 2021. Now, there are many people saying a motive remains unclear, but the deadly shooting is being investigated now, And this gets us to this political violence because it's being investigated as a hate crime. That's right, a hate crime. Because the investigators, they did find some evidence. And there was some hate rhetoric there. Now, the interesting thing about this was that one of the suspect's mom had contacted authorities before they even knew anything about that, reporting that her son was missing. That was 2 hours before the attack. That's what the San Diego police revealed. The police chief said on Monday following that terrible, terrible incident out there in San Diego. And when the mother contacted the authorities, they began to piece together bits and pieces of the information as it came to them. And they also found some disturbing things that the mom who reported this, she also is now reporting that her firearms were missing and her vehicle was missing. And then she said she believed that her son was suicidal. But let me tell you something. Cops got a lot more engaged and realized how urgent it was because they learned that her son, was also dressed in camouflage and was with another person. Now, you see, dress yourself in camouflage and go out with another person, that's really not consistent with somebody who's just going to go out and kill themselves. You see, then you get the idea that maybe something else is going on. Maybe there is going to be an attack. And sure enough, there were. These 2 teenagers shot and killed 3 people at the California mosque. Now, FBI tells us that they were radicalized online when they first met, and that they did share white supremacist views. But not only that, they just didn't really discriminate on who they hated. It seems like that almost, according to the FBI, that they hated a whole lot of people. In fact, the Associated Press gave us some information that these writings included hateful rhetoric toward Jewish people, Muslims, as well as the LGBTQ community. And also, not just that, but black people and women, both on the political left and right. And they both expressed beliefs that they thought white people were being eliminated. And one even wrote about mental health struggles and being rejected by women. Now, this really blows your mind. They also found 30 guns, ammunition, and a crossbow at these 2 residences of these guys that were radicalized and actually went out and killed 3 people at this mosque. Now, my friend, this is political violence. Again, I thought we might take just a moment and talk about that term, radicalized online. What does that mean? You hear that? You hear that all the time. They were radicalized, but radicalized online, what does that mean? Well, it actually means that these people, what they believe, that it actually becomes more extreme through the content that they're getting online, or communities that they're engaging in, or their interactions on the internet. And it usually means somebody is exposed to extreme political or religious or social views online. And then they begin to join certain groups that reinforce those views. And then it comes to the point, you see, usually this doesn't happen overnight, but after a while, then they become to the point that they actually are more accepting of being hostile and violent toward these situations. And it changes their beliefs often in ways that concerns the family, friends, researchers, or law enforcement. I think another good good illustration of this is what happened with the killer of Charlie Kirk, or I should say the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk. You remember the parents were saying that they were becoming concerned about their son, that he was changing. And the way he was changing was because he was getting involved, of course, with people that did not believe the way that he was brought up. Now, to be radicalized does not necessarily mean that somebody becomes violent, but sometimes it does. There are some people who hold extreme views without committing violence, but that term is often discussed when we talk about preventing violence, because if you can catch it before it happens, then you might be able to save lives. And that's very, very important to realize when you're doing it. Now, there was even another situation that happened that goes right back down to this idea of hate crime. This happened again in Chicago this time. That was where we had an illegal migrant who was accused of shooting an Orthodox Jewish man multiple times as this man was on his way to the synagogue last month. So you see, this goes all over the spectrum, even Protestant churches, and I'm, of course, involved in security work, and we do protect some faith-based organizations with armed security officers, and we need to be there because this goes across all the lines of denomination and religious affiliation. This guy actually shot a guy who was on his way to the Chicago synagogue. And we know that this guy, too, was using his cell phone, literally, to look at synagogues and Jewish community centers in the area before he made the attack. His cell phone contained more than 100 images of pro-Hamas and all kinds of crazy stuff there on his phone. That was according to the Chicago Sun-Times, who also cited the police. Now, Mohammed there, who was a guy has also now been hit with hate crime and terrorism charges for that October the 26th attack back in October, there where he was accused of shooting a 39-year-old Jewish man, and who was on his way simply to worship. Now, the police says that Mohammed, he was actually identified less than 30 minutes after the shooting. And when he was identified, now this guy turned around and actually shot at the responders. Then the police returned fire and struck him. And Mohammed was hospitalized with multiple gunshot wounds. Thankfully, no members of the police or fire departments were injured. Now, again, the cell phone data showed that he had been seeking out targets online. And folks, I'm telling you that this was a planned attack, attempted assassination of people. And they actually showed him the cameras. He fired at the man, he ran off and was trying to clear, it looks like, a jammed semi-automatic pistol. So he was going to shoot even more, and then he walked back toward the victim, and then he ran off again. And then he got in his car, drove a few blocks away, parked, and then returned on foot to the shooting scene. He fired twice then at the direction of 4 police officers who were out there at that point searching for evidence. Then he ran down the alley, cut through a yard, circled back toward the ambulance while they were loading this guy up. And then he shot again at the ambulance, hitting it twice. And then there was another police officer then returned the fire, and he fled, ran through a front yard. He shot at another police officer, and then finally he was shot and fell to the ground. But then he rose again to fire at the police again before collapsing on the sidewalk. So this guy was determined to inflict serious harm and death. I guess the reason why I'm sharing this, I wanted to come again. I wanted us to talk about political violence before we get into our story today of a guy who actually is charged with murder for shooting somebody that broke into his house. We're going to get there in just a moment, so hang with me. But I want to tell you that I do believe we're going to see more political violence. And the reason I believe that is because of the fact that now we have the internet on steroids. You and I both know that. With AI now, it is on steroids. And these algorithms that come about, they feed into this. So if a guy, you've seen it, your own, you have your examples in your own mind right now as I'm talking about it. You go online, you look at one thing, you want to buy maybe a rod and reel for some fishing that you want to do on your vacation coming up this summer. And then all of a sudden in your inbox, you see all kinds of advertisements for different fishing rods. And you think to yourself, well, how did they know I was looking for that? Well, the algorithm picked that up. And so what you find yourself drawn to, they're going to feed you more of it. So if you begin to get radicalized, if you begin to get into this idea of political violence, you're going to have more content online feeding into that desire for political violence. And it's going to increase your likelihood of not only being radicalized, but your likelihood at that point of moving over from just thinking it in your head to doing something about it. And that brings you into political violence. So yes, I do believe in the coming days, we're going to see more political violence in this country because of the fact that the internet is now on steroids with AI, and we're going to see more of it. So brace yourself, my friend. In the coming year, I believe we're going to see a whole lot more. Sadly, I hope I'm wrong. But I believe we're going to see a whole lot more of political violence. Well, I did tell you that we had a whole lot to cover, and we want to get into this idea of this guy that actually is charged by murder now because he shot somebody in his house. We're going to get to that in a moment, but before we do that, I've got to get in our crazy crook story. So here is Charlie Crimebuster's crazy story of the week. Well, our crazy crook story today comes from Palm Coast, Florida, just up the road from us here in Daytona. Actually, it's a small city about 60 miles southeast of Jacksonville, Florida. Now, this comes to do with something that a lot of us, I guarantee you know what I'm talking about when I talk about identity theft and the fact that these thieves out there are getting your personal information all the time. This is not an advertisement for something, but this is something that really happened. This victim said she visited a nail salon on August 6th, and 3 days later, she realized that she no longer had her credit card in her possession. Then, when she went and checked, as you and I would, she checked for activity, she then found 10 charges that had been placed from August the 6th to August the 9th last year, with over $500 in purchases in the stores and restaurants throughout Palm Coast. Now, in that investigation, they did get some surveillance footage from various stores where the victim's card was used. And then they considered that their suspect was a white woman, long dark hair, who was wearing a white camouflage jacket. Otherwise, really, the investigators didn't have too much to go about. But they put that out online. On September of this past year, Sheriff's Office posted an attempt to identify request on Facebook. And there was a very low-resolution photo of a woman wearing a white hoodie. So that's all they had now. Remember that. All they had was that low-resolution photo of a woman wearing a white hoodie. Well, as it turned out, this lady, by the name of Gifford, she reached out about the post. The detectives were notified that a woman called the Flagler County Emergency Communications Center. She said she was the individual and she wanted to speak to the detectives on the case. Now, when she got to him, she said, I don't understand why you're putting my image out there. I have nothing to do with this, and you've got me on the internet. I've done nothing wrong. Well, see, they didn't show all of the footage that they had, because then the detectives showed Gifford images of her taken from other surveillance, which showed her in Walmart using that credit card to purchase items, including notebooks and pens. Well, at that point, she realized that she was caught, and she acknowledged that it was her in the photographs. And then in the interview later on, now get this, talk about a crazy crook, why in the world she would call them up and say, hey, I want to talk to you. You know, they didn't really know who they were looking for, but she calls up and says, I want to talk to you, and it wasn't me. But then, as she showed the contents of her backpack, you can't make this stuff up. It actually contained notebooks and pens that appeared to be the very same ones that she purchased at Walmart with that stolen credit card. So, my friend, this lady, who was such an idiot that she called her own self into detectives, said she wanted to speak to him, thought that she was smarter than them, and she said, well, you shouldn't be putting my image out there, even though they did not have a clear image. This lady who turned herself in and went to the police department with the stolen materials that she got using the stolen credit card is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crook of the week. Now, you probably have thought, like a lot of people do, that if somebody broke into your home in the middle of the night and you shot them, you would be in the clear. Well, there is a homeowner that was charged after he shot a person who was found in a bed sleeping with another woman inside his home. But there's a little difference in it. It was a vacant home, but he still owned it. Timothy Smith said that he found this guy by the name of Justin King in a bedroom with an unidentified woman back this month on May the 1st. Now, Smith, he was 59 years of age. He was with his daughter, and he was armed with a handgun. There, he engaged in an argument with King, and he was ordering him to leave his house. Authorities then say that Smith aimed the gun at King and fired, shooting him in the neck. Now, Smith told police, he said that King stepped toward him before the fatal shot. So, of course, this happened in the neighborhood, and unfortunately it's happened more and more today. I just read in our own community here that I live in, there was a house not too far from us where they were found squatters that were living in that home as well. And the police were called there, and that's a different story for a different time. But this neighborhood had been having all kinds of issues with the homeless. And then that's why Smith and his daughter thought that they ought to arm themselves when they were visiting the home that they owned, a home that they owned. They weren't living there, but they owned it. And he went into that home. He did admit that he did not see King with any weapons. But he said that, well, the trespasser shouldn't be in the home in the first place, and he was right about that. He went on to say, he said, it wouldn't have happened if you weren't here. That's what the landlord told the police after the shooting. Now, King, the guy that he shot, was hospitalized for over a week after the shooting, but he was then thankfully taken off of life support on May the 8th. Now, the homeowner was initially charged with assault battery with a deadly weapon, but then those charges was actually upgraded to first-degree manslaughter after King's death, because King did die. They ended up taking him off of life support, it appears, so he did die. So now he's charged with first-degree manslaughter. Smith, of course, the homeowner, was then booked into the Oklahoma County Detention Center and was being held on $25,000 bond. Now, here's the thing. Here's what the state of Oklahoma said about it. They said there's no death penalty for squatting in the state of Oklahoma. You can't just take a gun and shoot somebody. That's what the criminal defense attorney, one of them, said. He said at the trial, I'm sure the defense will be self-defense, and I'm sure it will be too. Because, you're in your own home. This guy is squatting there, and he begins to make a move toward you. So, in Florida here, we have something called stand your ground. Now, that is a self-defense law that removes the legal duty to retreat before using force in certain situations. Now, in general, that means under Florida law here, a person may use force to defend themselves or another person if they reasonably believe it's necessary to stop an imminent threat. So there's where the key is. Was this necessary to stop an imminent threat, a threat that could have caused serious bodily harm to you or another person? Now remember, his daughter was there with him too. His daughter was there with him. Now this is if a person is in a place where they have a legal right to be. We do know that he had a legal right to be, and he is not engaged in criminal activity. They do not have to retreat before using force, including deadly force when legal requirements are met. Now the key there, my friend, pay close attention, is where legal requirements are met. And by the way, Oklahoma has a stand your ground law just like Florida does. Now the key points is no duty to retreat. You generally do not have to try to escape or run away from defending yourself if you're lawfully present where the incident occurs. Now, deadly force. There's another key. Deadly force may be justified if a person reasonably believes it is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm or the imminent commission of a forcible felony. Now, Florida law provides additional protection when somebody unlawfully or forcibly enters a dwelling, resident, or occupied vehicle. And some circumstances, the law presumes the offender had a reasonable fear of death or serious harms. Now, here's something else that's very, very important. And many of you probably remember back a few years ago in February of 2012, there was a townhouse here in Sanford, Florida, just down the road from me. On the evening of February the 26th, there was a young kid, teenager by the name of Trayvon Martin. He was walking back to his fiance's house from a nearby convenience store when Zimmerman, you remember that name, he was the community watch. He saw Martin, reported him to the Sanford police as suspicious, and several minutes later, an altercation happened, and Zimmerman fatally shot Martin in the head. Now, Zimmerman was injured in that altercation. He said he shot Martin in self-defense. He was not charged at the time, but then he was charged, and then he turns around. There was a big trial, and Zimmerman was eventually charged, tried, but they found him not guilty, acquitted him of second-degree murder and manslaughter in July of 2013. Of course, after that, there are all kinds of rallies and this type of thing as you go along. Now, I've often wondered, I could not understand why the attorney there did not use stand your ground. The reason why the attorney there did not use stand your ground in defending Zimmerman was there's another key point here in Florida, and that is you do not have to retreat from there, but there's another thing that says that you do need to make sure that you're not the person that's initiating this whole situation. Well, we know that Zimmerman did initiate that, and I think that's one of the reasons why the attorney decided to go with self-defense instead of stand your ground. So, in Oklahoma, it's going to boil down to this, my friend. It's going to boil down, I don't think you can't use stand your ground on that situation. It's going to come down to the fact of self-defense. It usually always does, even in stand your ground situations, it usually comes down to self-defense. Self-defense says you have a right to defend yourself if you feel that the person can actually give you intimate harm, can kill you, or cause serious bodily injury. So the question will be, when this guy, if he did, made a move toward the homeowner, and the homeowner felt that his life or the life of his daughter was in serious harm. What do you think about that? Well, I think it's going to depend on, number one, how big was this guy? How mincing was this guy? And compared to the shooter. So, the fact of ownership of property alone does not automatically mean you can use deadly force and make it lawful. Now, it's much, much different if you're in your home at night, you're sleeping, and somebody breaks into your house. Somebody breaks into my house, they're going to be in for whooping for sure, because I'm going to defend my castle. And you have a right to defend your castle. But in this situation, this was not the guy in his home with his daughter, minding their own business. This is him going to check on one of his rental houses, I guess, where there was a possibility that there was a squatter. And so he goes there with a weapon to defend himself, and then this altercation takes place, and he ends up shooting the guy. What do you think? I'd love to hear from you about this. Reach out to me with a shout-out. You can reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Now, the critical question in this situation will be whether the owner reasonably believed that they face an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm when that squatter moved toward them. Now, merely moving toward someone may or may not be enough, depending upon the circumstances. The threats. Was there a weapon? We know there wasn't a weapon at this point from what we've heard from the squatter. But was there an aggressive action? Now, stand your ground will remove the duty to retreat, but it does not eliminate a requirement that force needs to be legally justified. So what do you think? Was he justified to shoot? I guess it depends on really what was happening during that time when the squatter, if the squatter did, move toward him. For instance, what if the squatter were to reach out, take the weapon from the homeowner, and then use it on the homeowner? So there's a whole lot of gray area here. This is going to be a very interesting case for us to follow on Charlie Crimebuster. Did he have the right to shoot to defend himself and his daughter? What do you think? Reach out with a shout out. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. We're certainly going to follow this case and see what happens. Well, time's already gone. We're probably going to have to give ourselves more time if we continue to cover all the stuff that's happening out there. But we thank you for being a part of the Charlie Crime Train today, and we look forward next week when we bring you another Charlie Crimebuster episode. Until this time, next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. We would like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and also encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts, or for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us at 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster.